And this is how it sounded at Trump Tower last night.
The best way to beat the system is have evenings like this, where you get record-setting votes, where you get record-setting delegates. I think we're going to do great in the general. Well, I may act differently, but my thought process is the same. You know, when I speak to a group of 10 people in a conference room, I'm not going to be speaking the same way I spoke in Pennsylvania yesterday to 25,000 people. It's a very different thing. I think the only card she has is the woman's card. She's got nothing else going. And frankly, if Hillary Clinton were a man, I don't think she'd get 5% of the vote. The only thing she's got going is the woman's card. And the beautiful thing is, women don't like her.
Yeah, that seems to be the case, and yet Hillary Clinton will obviously bring out that card and try to play it throughout the general election, which is the direction we're now headed. Following the 5 primaries last night, 2 of them in New England states and 3 happening in the Middle Atlantic, Donald Trump, according to one, and I guess I'll trust Bill Hemmer from Fox News because he's looking at some of the maps and the returns as they're coming in. Bill Hemmer at Fox News says not only did Donald Trump, he won in 2 of these states, he won more than 60% of the Republican vote. And these are generally closed primaries. He also, so you don't have people who are even crossing over. And in the other 3 states, he won well over 50% of the vote. And in some cases, close to 60%, which is quite a remarkable, even though he was expected to win these states, quite a remarkable comeback because 2 weeks ago he was being written off as peak Trump. In other words, he'd reached his peak, he was past it, and now things were going to go in the other direction for him. Yes, he would pick up these states, but not by very big margins. And yet, 50 to in one of these states, in Rhode Island, was it 64%? Delaware, 61%, 57% in Connecticut, nearly 57% in Pennsylvania, which was the big prize. But he won every county in all 5 of those states. It's not just winning 5 states, it's winning every county in those 5 states. You have a lot of people who say that this is not over yet. Folks, I watched a fellow this morning diagram how it could go it could go against Donald Trump at the National Republican Convention, the Republican National Convention in Cleveland in July, because this fellow is saying Trump could come up 22 delegates short of the number to win on the first ballot. Let's be honest. I know there are a lot of Republicans out there who are thinking, and these are the people who don't like Trump, that never Trump movement. They've been trying to stop Donald Trump. And for a lot of us who are not on the Trump bandwagon, you look at that and you say, well, we gave it our best shot. But they're thinking, you know what? We'll go to this convention. If he's 22 votes shy, we'll figure out a way to take it away from him. And we'll just tell the American people and the rank and file of this party, you'll vote for whoever we pick, and you'll be okay with that. And they believe somehow, they believe that if they just simply ordain it at the convention, that you'll go, well, all right, I'll vote for Ted or Kasich or Bush or whoever they come up with. And that you'll just say, yeah, that somehow this will not be seen as theft by the American people. There's this huge problem with perception that some of these Republicans have who are behind this movement. It's as if they never had any experience in public relations. They're just completely devoid of how this is, any knowledge of how this is going to play out with the American people if this continues. And I think one of the reasons Trump did so well in these 5 states is because he kept talking about how these rules were set up in other states, Colorado, for instance, and how you could walk in as a candidate and walk away with the delegates. Now, Trump did not even try to pick up those Colorado delegates. We've got to mention that. But he was able to portray it as being a setup, a scam. And people are buying into that. They're fed up with this sort of thing. 10 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And then Hillary Clinton, obviously, taking a celebratory turn, even though she did not win all 5 states last night that were available to her as a Democrat.
Mr. Trump accused me of playing the, quote, woman card. Well, if fighting for women's health care and paid family leave and equal pay is playing the woman card, then deal me in. As a great Democratic president once said, there's nothing wrong with America that can't be cured by what's right with America. With your help, we're going to come back to Philadelphia for the Democratic National Convention. with the most votes and the most pledged delegates.
Caw, 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 caw. I know, I hated to do that while some of you are still eating breakfast. We have a telephone caller with us this morning. You can reach us locally, 736-0300, 736-0300. And, of course, you're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley on Top Story, and you're up next.
Good morning, Bill. You know, it amazes me with the Donald Trumpists. It reminds me so much of Barack Obama's deal. You know, he has brought people in, and there's no doubt, but he's brought in the moderates and the lefts and everything else, and it is showing in his campaign. They are not going out and studying on their own. They just take everything he says for fact. And a typical liberal type situation, he's the one lying and calling other people liars, and everybody believes him, and it's just smearing everybody else. It's just, the morals this guy has is just unbelievable.
I think what you'll find is once he's the nominee, and I do believe he could be president, people are going to be greatly disappointed in the fact that he can't deliver on everything that he promised.
Well, Bill, I'll take you to lunch if it doesn't work out, but I think he is going to be president.
Yeah, I think after you listen to Hillary Clinton screeching on stage, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, but the problem is we're going to find out we're going to be 4 years into another Barack Obama deal, totally different direction, where he's going to sit on the throne and want to do everything by fiat.
I thank you much for the telephone call, and you're right. He talks as if he's going to bypass the House and the Senate or anyone who really gets in his way. Doesn't work, and especially even within your own party. Ask Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter went to Washington and felt, I don't need these people. He was an abject failure as president, maybe the worst of the last century. Well-meaning fellow, got there, couldn't get anything done, couldn't accomplish anything. Trump says, I'm going to build a wall and Mexico will pay for it. Okay, you and whose army? You can't seriously send the army down there and force them to pay for it. I guess you could, but it would likely lead to your impeachment and your removal from office, and the army would likely refuse and say, we're not going down there to make them pay for a wall. Where's the money going to come from otherwise? Again, the country is $20 trillion officially in debt at the national level. Officially. Now, would the wall be nice? Yeah. But can we do it right away? No. There's got to be other ways you can do this. A literal wall? Maybe not. Maybe there's some other ways to go about it. Sensors deployed along the borders and a few more people keeping an eye on things. But this notion that you just go in there and you say, well, we'll do it. There is a reason, though, Trump does resonate with people, and it's because he's talking to them directly and they're responding. And this is where I think a lot of the Republican elites have gotten it wrong. Really, the elites in all of America. Byron York, writing today at the Washington Examiner, says, what was once furious Republican opposition to Donald Trump's proposal to temporarily ban foreign Muslims from entering the U.S. has turned to virtual silence in the face of widespread GOP voter approval. Now, for all those people out there who claim, oh, racist bigot, racist bigot, racist bigot, every time something like this comes up, here are some polling numbers. In Wisconsin, 69% supported Trump's idea. Florida, 64%. Georgia, 68%. Ohio, 65%. Michigan, 63%. Michigan may have the highest proportional population of Muslims in the country, and yet 2/3 of the Republicans there say yes. New Hampshire, 65%. Texas, 67%. Approval is so extensive, York writes, that Trump's proposal is rarely the subject of extended discussion today. So he has addressed issues that no one else would, because these wimps who are running for public office, they go along and do whatever the media tells them, and the media says, oh, that's mean-spirited. And then if they even cross that line, then they step back and say, I'm sorry, and then they start self-flagellating, and the public says, another wimp. 816, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Hi. You were talking just a little bit ago about whether or not the heads of the GOP understood that picking somebody else, if Trump is 22 votes short or whatever, that picking somebody else would infuriate the voters and turn them off. I honestly believe that the Mitt Romneys and the John McCains, they would rather have Hillary as president than Donald Trump, or even Ted
Sure.
Cruz, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
She
absolutely.
doesn't threaten their power.
Right. She's
They
part of the
will still have all the
Republicrat.
power.
The Republicrat establishment, as Michael Savage calls it.
Exactly.
That's spot on. And they talk the same language. I got to thank him for that call. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com.
Good morning. When you mentioned that Trump wouldn't be able to get all the things that he said he could get done, I could probably agree with that. But there is one thing that I think he's kind of brilliant on, and I'm terrible at math, and I may prove that in this conversation. I don't know. But with our deficit of, let's just say, $20 trillion, well, the deficit between China and America, our trade, is, what, 500 billion, I think?
Pretty close. Yeah.
And if he can adjust that, I'm not a math whiz, but just in a matter of 10 years, adjusting that deficit really take a big dent out of our federal, deficit, where we're in the red, are those numbers not adding up? 500 billion.
The thing is,
two.
he talks about tariffs and saying he'll punish companies that take jobs overseas through tariffs when instead, likely, if you're looking to work with them, a lower corporate income tax rate would likely bring a lot of them back, which would seem to me you get more flies with honey.
Sure. And I just think if that whole deficit between China and us, if he can address that, then our federal deficit is not the issue that it's made out to be. That's a huge number, but if we are starting to adjust this gap in trade between us and other countries, that number goes down really quickly.
It would. Thank you for the call, and we'd still have to take a look at all the other spending that we do. And Trump says, no, we're going to keep all of the social programs. Obamacare, he's not a fan of. He's actually a fan of the single-payer national health care system. Oy vey. Look, there are a lot of things the man says. I sit back and I go, yeah. And that's what I think people are doing. But we're not thinking about the cost of all of these other things. And the deficits and the debt are only going to balloon if everything that he promises gets delivered. Now, when he says, I'll bring in Carl Icahn and some real business people to run these things efficiently, that's another matter. And if he could get Congress to go along with eliminating some of these useless departments, energy, EPA, there's so many that we could get rid of them and get them out of the way, then surely we could be much more efficient when it comes to government. But once you close all of the efficiencies and you find all of the savings, it's still going to be just a drop in the bucket. And no one in this country wants to hear the real truth. And it's unfortunate because politicians make their bones by saying, we'll make America great again, or America's best days are ahead of us. And that's what we want to hear, right? We don't want to hear, hey, it's going to get really, really nasty and never get better. Do want to mention we have a health professional coming along in about 10 minutes. We call it Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine, which is located right here in Twin Falls on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. They always like to remind you life's too short not to feel good. Had a great conversation last week about allergy season, which I really hadn't given much thought. I hadn't given much thought to allergy season until actually all of the blooms came out. And then all of a sudden it was like, yep. I walk around the house now. There are certain times a day, and all of a sudden you just feel it. You got to stop. You got to find the tissues. And so we'll pick up on a conversation today about various health issues, and we do want to remind you have an opportunity to call and get a little advice from medical professionals while they're in studio with us. And I always like to remind people that they are still looking for new patients, and they can see you on the same day, generally the same day when you have an issue. So how often does that happen any longer? We're long past that point where you used to pay the doctor with a chicken, and he'd come and make the house call, but this is pretty close. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on Top Story at 8:24 with Bill Colley. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Well, one of the things that Trump has brought out was suspending bringing in any more Muslims, in at least for a while, because there's no vetting and so forth. That has kind of gone to the back burner, but if you read the paper a couple days ago, it was 101 anniversary of the Armenian genocide by Muslims, and that started way back in 1071 AD and so forth. And during World War I, there was 3 generals, young Turks, killed over 1.5 million, and they drove them in the deserts. They over cliffs. They burned them alive. They leveled cities. And it's just the history of Islam, Muslims, is just one of killing and hate. And yet people still don't get that. If they follow the Quran, there's over 100 verses that said if we don't convert, they're going to do that. And then Trump has brought this out, and it's been kind of shoved aside for a while. But I think we need to bring that back out because these people are still coming in droves, and they're not vetted. And people need to be aware, and we need to stop bringing these people into our communities, into this country, until they take over.
I'm a firm believer that we just need to have a better system of knowing. I'll make a little personal story here. My grandmother on my mother's side, she had a sister named Carrie, that was my great aunt, who married a fellow by the name of Kasanjan, whose family they fled that crisis and settled in this country. And I heard the stories for many, many years. And these people were not liars. They were just very nice, down-to-earth people, and the detail that they shared was not something you could make up. And it shows you. There's a story today at Christian Post about a woman. She's a Christian woman. She's actually, I guess, she's a British national, married to a soldier, though, in the Pakistani army. He was off serving at his base. So because the neighbors knew he was away, 2 men came over, threatened her daughter, to kill her daughter, and they raped her. This is because, and they told her, as a Christian woman, she's just a whore. We're dealing with this around the world, and yet we give these people billions of dollars to top all of this as well.
Well, yeah, that's just it. We turn around and give them money to blow us up and do whatever they want to. But, I figured out why there's so many Muslims in the world. You go to out there, they go out and said, if you don't convert, we kill you. And so, that's quite a recruiting tool in itself. So I really feel that that's part of the reason there really is a lot of them. And, there's no salvation except when you commit a suicide bomb, then you get those 72 virgins. So there's no salvation like a Christian salvation. So people wake up. These people are not, getting into our culture. They're going to try to take it over with Sharia law.
I thank you for the call. I wonder what happens if they actually get to the wherever they're going after one of these bombings and discover that promise of 72 virgins isn't true. Well, tell you what, could I have 54 slightly used? Maybe they. Here's a couple over here. They've been around the block a few times, but yeah, take them. You're up next. You're on the air at 828. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. I hope you're having a great morning.
Always.
I would just like to share our experience with the CSI refugee program. My parents have rentals. Against my begging and pleading, my mother let one of these refugees into one of the rentals. Of course, it was a single young man, no wife, no kid or anything. And I don't know if they're telling them that they're going to give them a free ride or what. They totally have the welfare mentality going on. CSI fought tooth and nail to get this fellow into our rental, and 4 months never collected a penny from anything. And now that we're evicting him, can't get a hold of anybody, any help from the refugee program, can't get any help from anybody. It's ridiculous.
Again, government did its part, then it walked away and left everybody else with the best. I thank you very much for the telephone call, sir. We've got a break coming up shortly. We'll have Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine in just a few moments. Russell Singleton, a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine, will be joining us on the air. He's also available to take your telephone calls. Keep that in mind. That's on the way in the next half hour on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And it's 44, on our way maybe to 60 today.